e-learning of body fluids. So this is the learning outcome. This is the same as the one that I listed in your learning guideline. The only difference is regarding the learning outcome of defined pH and buffering. I will not cover it through the video. You can just read it from the complete version of the lecture note because it is quite straightforward and brief, and usually you will cover it in more detail in your biochemistry subject. So for this topic, you do not need to concern that much regarding the learning outcome of defining pH and also the buffering. So without further ado, let's proceed with the video. So fluids in the body. Before we talk about how fluids are distributed in the body and how it can affect our body function, we want to understand how much of our body is made of water. I'm sure most of you have heard of this before, that most of our body are made of water. In fact, the standard is between 55 to 60% of our body weight are due to water. However, the percentage is higher in newborn and infant. So this is one thing that we need to be aware of. And generally, the percentage will decrease as the age increases. So the older you are, the less of your body are made of water. And also there is slight difference between gender, where female generally they have lower percentage of water when compared to male. So if you look at this, then you can see that for newborn, the percentage can be up to 74%. And as you can see, as you grow older, the percentage will drop. So when we talk about the majority of population, which is in this area, then you can see that the average for male is around 60%, and for female it's slightly lower. It can be between 50 to 60%. So these are the different amount of body water regarding age and gender that we need to be aware of. So what about fluid balance? So fluid balance is important for the body to function properly. The majority of intake usually is through drink or food, or what we call it ingestion through the mouth. So for fluid loss, how we can lose water from our body, it can be through two major types, which is insensible, which is evaporation from the skin, or from the lung through breathing. I'm sure you all have tried to breathe against a mirror. Then you can see there is a white water there. So that is the water that lost every time we exhale. So these two are insensible. Sensible is more straightforward. So usually through sweating from the feces and the urine, you can lose a lot of water. It's how the body regulates the fluid balance. So if you take a look at this table, an example of normal fluid balance of intake and output, then you can see the majority of intake usually through food or drink, and the majority of loss is through urine. And you have some for others, sensible and insensible loss. One thing that you need to be aware is the loss from water evaporation through skin are different from sweating, because from the skin, this one, it can occur without sweating. So there are differences between these two. So make sure you know the difference between insensible loss through skin and sensible loss through sweating. These are different. When you talk about fluid balance, it can be just right. Too little or too much fluid in the body can cause problem. Not enough water, I think we all know dehydration is the term we use when your body lack water. Too much water, usually we call it edema, or sometimes commonly known as swelling. So the swelling can occur in any part of the body or generalized swelling. We call it generalized edema. Edema at certain part of the body, sometimes the periorbital in your eye, sometimes peripheral in your knee can get swelled, or in your abdomen, we call it ascites. So there is a lot of different type of swelling. Depends on where the fluids accumulate. So for all of these fluids that we talked about body in our body that made up 60% of our body weight, how do we divide them? So there are two main compartments, which is the intracellular fluids and extracellular fluids. Intracellular is straightforward from the name, you know that is in the cell. So all of the fluid in the cell, your cytoplasm and everything, we call it intracellular fluid. Extracellular is the opposite, outside of the cell, and it divided to interstitial fluids and also blood plasma, which is in the blood vessel. So these are the two main compartments. If you do some extra reading, there are an additional compartment that's what called transcellular fluids. Because in our body, there's a lot of these small pockets of area where contain fluids as well. So those are, example, your synovial joints, which is joint, like your shoulder joints, like your knee. To lubricate the joint movement, you will have fluid there. It's what we call synovial fluid. Or you have fluid in the peritoneum in your gastrointestinal, or in your heart, you have, surrounding your heart, you have this pericardial layer that contains water. Periorbital, which is in your eye, you know your eye, your vitreous humor and everything here, you have water there. And CSF, which is a special fluid in your central nervous system. So all of these other fluids that are not included in intracellular or extracellular fluid, we group them as transcellular fluid. So how do we divide them? So in a standard 70 kilogram man, where 60% of the mass is water, then we know that the total of body water is 42 liters. So we call it TBW, or total body water. So for these 42 liters, 2/3 of them are intracellular, or roughly 28 liters. And the rest, 1/3, are extracellular, which is 14 liter. And for this 14 liter, 11 are your interstitial fluid and 3 are your blood plasma. So if you look at this image, then you can see that all of these are your TBW. Right, so this is your ICF, like you mentioned here, and this is your ECF, which you divide into plasma and interstitial fluid. So in our body, these are the three main compartments that contain fluids. So as I mentioned before, transcellular fluid really not considered. Roughly, if you combine all, you have around 1 liter. But when we talk about fluid balance, when we talk about plasma, when you want to treat dehydration and when we want to treat edema, usually we do not count the transcellular fluid. Another thing that I want to mention is plasma volume, the one that we cover in your ECF, right? This is not equal to your blood volume. So blood volume, so the blood volume is not equal to plasma, because plasma is only a subset of blood. Because in blood, you also have your white blood cell, like your leukocyte, and you have your red blood cell, your erythrocyte here. So the plasma and the cells make the total blood volume. But when we talk about fluid balance, inside the blood vessel, usually we only concern with the plasma volume. So make sure you know the difference. So that is the end for the first video in this lecture. And we will continue in the next video. We will talk about fluids composition and movement. Thank you. I'll see you in the next lecture.